All right, if you're even remotely interested in trading, you've got to hear about this book, Reminiscences of a Stock Operator. For a lot of people, it's not just a book, it's the book. Now, it's technically a fictionalized story about a guy named Larry Livingston, but come on, everybody knows who it's really about, the absolute legend, Jesse Livermore.
So you have to ask yourself, how does one guy go from being a kid trading in shady backroom bucket shops to becoming the single most feared man on all of Wall Street? How on earth did he manage to call the great crash of 1929 and walk away like a king? Well, the answers are all baked into the lessons he learned along the way. And look, to really get why his words still carry so much weight, you need to understand the kind of money we're talking about. At his absolute peak, Livermore's fortune was staggering. In today's money, we're talking billions. This wasn't a guy playing the market. This was a guy who, on his own, could be the market. And he lived a life to match. We're talking private railway cars, a fleet of yachts, a mansion so big it came with its own live-in barber. I mean, who does that? But here's the thing. The rise was epic, but the fall was just as spectacular. He went broke, more than once. By 1934, just 5 short years after his greatest victory, it was all gone. And unfortunately, the story ends in tragedy. In 1940, Jesse Livermore took his own life.
It's a heartbreaking story for sure. But it's because he lived through those unbelievable highs and devastating lows that his lessons are so incredibly powerful. He paid for this wisdom with everything he had. He went through it all so that maybe, just maybe, we can learn without paying that same price.
So let's jump into the first big lesson. And it all started with a simple piece of advice from an old-timer at the brokerage, a guy everybody called Old Turkey, that just completely flipped a switch for Livermore.
So picture this. Young Livermore's in the office and all the younger traders are getting hyped up, seeing a quick little profit. They keep running up to this old fella, Partridge, asking him, should I sell? Should I take the money now? And every single time, Partridge would just calmly look up from his paper and say, you know, it's a bull market.
Now, at first that sounds kind of obvious, right? But he was teaching something much, much deeper. What he was really saying was, stop getting distracted by the little wiggles. The day-to-day noise doesn't matter. The real life-altering money, he was saying, is found by figuring out the market's main current, the big wave, and just staying on for the ride.
And for Livermore, that was the light bulb moment. He suddenly got it. The whole game wasn't about trying to snag 100 tiny little profits. It was about sizing up the entire market, asking one simple question: are we in a bull market or a bear market? And then just getting in sync with that massive, powerful force.
So, okay, finding the big trend is step one. But what you do after that, well, that's what Livermore said was the single hardest part of the entire game.
This is one of his most famous quotes, and it's so important. He said, flat out, that it wasn't his smarts or his analysis that made him his fortune. It was his ability to sit tight, to have the patience and the raw nerve to hold on to a winning trade, fighting that constant nagging urge to just grab a quick profit and run for the hills.
And think about it, this is the complete opposite of what most people do. An amateur is terrified of a winning trade getting smaller, so they sell way too early. But they'll hold on to a losing trade forever, just hoping and praying it'll come back. A master does the exact reverse. They cut their losers instantly, but they let their winners run and run and run.
The book even gives a brilliant practical way to do this from another trader named Pat Hearn. His system was beautiful. He'd buy a small starter position. If it went up just 1%, that was his signal to buy more. As long as it kept climbing, he kept adding to his position. But, and here's the genius part, every time he bought more, he'd move his stop loss up. He was building a huge position while keeping his actual risk tiny.
All of which leads us to the final lesson. And honestly, this is the big one. Because the real war isn't fought on a stock ticker. It's fought in the 6 inches between your ears.
What this really means is that you have to completely rewire your natural human instincts. For a losing trade, your gut reaction is hope. Oh, please let it turn around. A trader has to replace that with fear. This could get much worse. I need to get out. And for a winning trade, your gut screams fear. I gotta sell before I lose it. A trader has to train themselves to feel hope. This could be the big one. Let's see where it goes.
Livermore was absolutely clear about this. He said your greatest enemies in the market are not bad news or a sudden crash. Your enemies are hope and fear. When it comes to trading, those two emotions are pure poison. You have to learn to be fearful when others are hopeful, and hopeful when they are fearful.
So, when you put all these pieces together, when you can read the trend, have the discipline to ride it,
and get control of your own mind. What you're left with is a trading philosophy that's just as rock solid today as it was 100 years ago.
So let's just boil it down to the non-negotiable rules. Rule number 1, figure out the main trend and go with it. Don't fight the current. Number 2, when you're right, find the courage to sit tight and do nothing. Number 3, cut your losses, do it fast, and do it without getting emotional. And the final rule, the most important one, master your own mind because hope and fear will absolutely wipe you out.
And in the end, it all comes down to this one simple, humbling truth. You are never, ever going to beat the market. It's too big, too powerful. The only opponent you can ever really beat is yourself.
Look, everything we've covered here is really just scratching the surface. The book itself is just an absolute masterclass, full of incredible stories, strategies, and insights that were paid for in blood, sweat, and tears. So if any of this stuff clicks with you, I mean really, you owe it to yourself to go read the whole thing. It's not just a story, it's the master's playbook.